Hey everyone, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I'm your host, Marissa Tandon, and today's episode is the second half of my conversation with Mei Rothschild. We're talking about Steven Universe, and if you haven't caught the first half of our conversation from last week, be sure to go back and listen to that first before starting this episode. If you're all caught up, I hope you enjoy the rest of our conversation. We've talked a lot about like the internet now, but the internet in 2013 was a totally different place, I think. And you mentioned sort of like Tumblr going wild for Steven Universe in particular. And I'm kind of curious about your experience watching the show and engaging with the fandom itself growing up at that time.
Sure. It's an interesting one, let me tell you that. Mostly because by the time that Steven Universe rolled around, I was 16, 17-ish. Obviously this is like the very early days.
Hmm.
But I learned my lesson by that point. I was like, I don't engage with fandom. I don't speak to it. They are messy and my friends always tease me because even to this day, I'll like read something, I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna say something, I'm gonna quote retweet, I'm gonna be that jerk that says that. And then my friends are just like, May, you are fighting a 13-year-old online. And I'm fighting a 13-year-old online. And then I delete it, I'm
Yeah.
just like, yeah, okay, let me tone it down a bit. Even though, but I have anger issues from playing League of Legends all these years. Like that was my villain origin story. Indulging in Steven Universe, I'm an artist. I indulged in all of the art.
Mm.
I loved the art. Steven Universe has such a unique art style, especially for its backgrounds. Absolutely stunning. I loved seeing all the fan art that poured out. I believe I watched a handful of animatics. Definitely seeing like the boards that came out from the actual board artists from different episodes. That was always controversial about how they didn't match character model. That was always an interesting thing to see. But I didn't actually engage with it, mostly because there was so much controversy,
Mm.
and the best way to enjoy a piece of media is to not engage with the fandom. It is to carve out your own niche, talk to your friends, and if you want to draw content and fan art or whatever, toss it out. Do not engage. Do not engage with people. You will save yourself a migraine. Speaking from experience, because quite frankly, growing up and drawing fan art specifically, I have had not like huge audience bases or anything, but I had like moments where my accounts were much more active because I was drawing some art for something that was popular,
Mm.
and I, of course, during those spurts, you're going to have people who want to pick fights. And especially as a teen, it's really easy to get, inflammatory comments.
Sure.
So Steam Universe just had a lot of controversy going on. I, of course, read some of this stuff, my opinions, I'm sure, have been shaped by things I've read. I personally, I don't think I've ever really put out any content. I've definitely drawn some art for Steven Universe. In fact, I've drawn Rose Quartz before. I'm pretty sure she was like the first plus size character I had ever drawn at the time. And I'll actually get into that story a little bit later, just because it's not really a story so much as just, yeah, indulging in Steven Universe at the time. There was, of course, all the theories going around. Those were always fun. All of the art, animatics, sharings of the music, funny comics. So much discourse. So much discourse. So much controversy. Everything just under the sun.
Yeah.
It was a huge fandom. It really was. And obviously now the series has ended, there are of course stragglers. It still exists, but it's not nearly as popular as it was back in the ye
Back in the
olden
day.
days, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I mostly did was I kept to myself. I didn't really engage with anyone in the fandom actually. Steven Universe was kind of like, it was like a long term, I guess,
Mm.
interest of mine in a way. Cause like sometimes I'll have like short hyperfixations and I don't stop drawing stuff for that. And honestly, part of that is usually art that I get a lot of engagement on.
Mm.
Cause that sort of helps, to feed like one of my biggest phases that a lot of people knew me for is my Good Omens phase. I drew a crap ton of Good Omens art, like a crap ton. My most popular YouTube video is a Omens animatic that people still come onto my comic, like Brimstones and Roses, and are like, "You made that?" I'm like, "Yeah," So I had a lot of Good Omens fan art, and I still have people who followed me from Good Omens here. Like that's the beauty of fan art; it helps you build a loyal fan base.
Sure.
And I was able to take those people, take some of those followers, and just be like, please go and check out my series once it had come out.
Yeah.
And so, having that long-standing community is really helpful. But Steven Universe, I never got actively into as an artist,
Mhm.
partially because the discourse scared me, but also because like I'm telling you, it was the Wild West back then. It was something. It was interesting. It was very interesting. And it's like, again, there were very valid criticisms made of the show. I would like to say that.
Yeah.
I don't think all of them were completely just kids, flipping off trying to stir up controversy so that they could get clout. There were a lot of problems that did show in some of the portrayals of the characters. That being said, the internet is not a place for nuanced discussion.
Sure.
Ever.
Absolutely.
So I just kept my head down. I drew stuff. I made an entire playlist of the Steven Universe, music. I just minded my business. I think I brought like a few pieces of fan art, like I have some keychains and stuff, but I didn't actively draw much of fan art because I think also at the time I was kind of going through an art slump because I didn't really know what I was doing with my art style.
Yeah.
But yeah, Steven Universe, it was in the background all along. It's like the
thing
it's
you
like
always
Humpty
come home
Dumpty
to.
from Puss in Boots.
Oh.
He was always there.
That's I really like that. I'm curious about sort of like fan art in general, not just necessarily for Steven Universe, but you mentioned Good Omens, and I'm sure the other properties that you were drawing for. Were you using fan art as a way to sort of like develop your own style, develop your skills as an artist, and to ultimately end up making your own characters outside of that?
I mean, that's a lot more technical. I was just drawing it because I like the characters and I had hyperfixate. And also, I think I'm funny, and sometimes the internet agrees, and I appreciate when that happens. All right, fine. I will tell you since, yeah, cringe culture is dead, as we were saying. So, the reason that I started drawing and actively posting online was because I was really, really into Hetalia as a child. And so whenever I was a child, I ran a forum, a roleplay forum for Hetalia, and one of my friends, and I used to draw all the assets for the forum because, I wasn't very much a art theft is wrong. It was more just like, I don't know how to save a JPEG.
Right.
So I would just draw it myself because I was like 12. So what were you expecting? I don't want to hear it. But yeah, but one of the people who were older than me was an artist and they drew digitally. It's like a bit of backstory for me. Again, I'm from like a really small town. We did not have a lot of funding for the arts, to put it lightly. My art class that existed in high school was printer paper and Crayola markers. Let's fucking go. Not great. And of course, I was much more of a gamer than, actually pursuing art. But whenever Italia came out and then I met these friends, and one of the people that I met ended up being kind of a jerk, quite frankly. I won't go into that. That's drama. But she was an artist and she was like, listen, there's this website called Tumblr. And I was like, what the fuck's a Tumblr? I only know DeviantArt. I was nicer. I was nicer than that, obviously. I was like a child though, but they knew that I drew. And so I would draw stuff for, the server. And people were like, this is really good. You should post it. And as a kid, I was like, I posted on DeviantArt, it's no big deal or whatever. But at the time, ask vlogs were a thing. Character ask vlogs.
Yes.
So, and I'm like revealing a lot about myself. And I swear to God, if anyone like hears this podcast and just starts to like slowly have an awakening, don't say anything to me, because I once told one of my friends, like I had mentioned to my friends that I had an ask vlog, and you know what? She drove me home from college, like from a college class one day, and in her car, she locked the doors and she said, May, I've been thinking. And then she locked the door and she's like, I used to follow your account.
Oh, I love that.
It's just me like sweating my ass has never been more sweaty in my life. What the hell? But yeah, so just don't listen. It was a dark time. I was a child. But yeah, so anyway, this friend though, she invited me to make a group ask vlog for Hetalia. And we did. And because I drew, I happened to get she also drew, but I drew, and I guess my art was more appealing because I got a lot more asks than her characters did. So a lot of them were focused towards mine. And that caused a very big rift to form. And to the point where she would like post on the things just like, you guys need to stop asking questions for this person. There are other characters and blah, blah. And meanwhile, like I have no idea what the hell's going on. And I'm just like replying and stuff. And then eventually she like kicked me out of the account and stuff. So I made my own account. And that's how I got started on Tumblr. I was a Hetalia Canada ask blog. You know what the most ridiculous part is? I was one of, so like for ask blogs, the point of an ask blog is that people will send in questions because Tumblr has an ask box feature. And then the ask blog is usually managed by like people will role play and pretend to be the character. And art ask blogs specifically will reply with like drawings of the character,
Mm.
answering the question or doing whatever. My first ask blog, my first Tumblr, solo Tumblr was a Devil Canada account. And so, deep down, I think I've always been destined to draw something with demons in it. This is what I've learned.
I love that. I think so the Ask Blog era of Tumblr, and I'm not sure that I am not as on Tumblr as I was at the time, so I'm not sure if it's still a thing, but the role playing of that really like came out with so much fun interactive content that you could sort of like watch the show or interact with whatever it was like that was the piece of media, but then go and sort of like build your own canon with each different Ask Blog. And it's that's such a fun start to have been sort of like the repetition of art that you were doing was drawing as an Ask Blog, a quite popular one, it sounds like.
Oh my god, I remember I hit, like, 2,000 followers the first time, and I lost my mind, I was so excited, and then I hit 6,000, I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm so cool." And then but, with Ask blogs, there's, of course, a lot of duplicates, and I remember that a big problem as a kid was envy, and,
Mm,
like, I still struggle with envy as an adult, not nearly as bad as when I was a child, oh my god. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting cave out of fandom stuff, and in a way, I'm kind of sad that that Ask blogs aren't really a thing just because they were really fun,
yeah.
but I don't think that they could exist at the capacity they did back then than they do now.
Mm,
And part of that, I think, is because those ass plugs are really inappropriate at times. Like, people just didn't behave, if that makes sense. Like, I
yeah.
was a minor running this account, and people are, of course, horny for their little anime waifus. And they would project that into an ass box of a minor. And of course, being a minor, you don't initially see the problem with it. And
Sure.
then as you get older, it's kind of like, that was really messed up. You know what I mean? I'm like, that was really inappropriate that y'all had me drawing that. Like, I a small anecdote, but like I do like very infrequent streams for what my Ask blog where I would draw responses, and I rarely did full bodies because I couldn't draw feet, and I refused to learn how. I stand by that to this day. But waist ups are usually what I draw, and so to this day, I still am extremely uncomfortable drawing like the crotch area of men's pants
Mm.
and just like of pants in general. Just because one time I was working on a like Ask blog and I had started trying to draw it, and someone was like, "Is that a bulge?" And I just remember being like really mortified and really uncomfortable because I was like 14 or like,
Yeah.
and I was like, first of all, I didn't really get it at first. And then I did get it. And that made it worse because I just remember like cropping the image after that. And
Mm.
just ever since then being really self conscious of how I draw like pants now in like that form, and I still am to this day. And I'm just like, that was weird, that was messed up, I was a child, you shouldn't have said that to me, you might have also been a child. It doesn't make it any less weird.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think the internet at that time and also just, like I'm sure now to still, like, the internet is unmoderated, so there is no way to keep from having those moments where you're, like, horrified, but it's interesting that you say that, like, it's still to this day is affecting what you draw and, like, your art style of that space.
Yeah, and it's like it's specifically male characters.
Yeah.
Like, definitely as I've grown experience as an artist, I still draw it, but, like, every time I draw it, I'm like, "Are people gonna think this is weird?" And
Mm.
then I'm like but now as an adult, I'm just like, "You know what? If they think it's weird, I'll just link them my Patreon." You know? Like
Yeah, very fair. Well, okay, let's talk a little bit about sort of your transition from sort of fan and fan artist and enjoyer of animated television to sort of creating your own content and creating this what I know you for personally with Brimstone and Roses, but also you mentioned other content that you've made. You mentioned sort of going to SCAD, which is I feel pretty like well known for putting out decent artists in terms of stuff that I've seen on the internet and become fans of.
and that's
Um
only the ones that will admit they went to SCAD, because there are a lot of us who don't.
yeah. So I'm curious, sort of like what was that transition like? What was the one of the things you mentioned about Steven Universe is that it stretched from sort of high school all the way through finishing art school, and I'm curious what made you finally decide to pull the trigger and become an artist professionally.
I became an artist whenever I realized I do not have the work ethic to be a doctor, and also my hands are shaky as shit, and also medical school is expensive, yes.
Yeah.
But so basically, going to art college, I kind of went just because I was like, I don't really have a choice, and then I was doing. Because first of all, my dad made it very apparent that I had to go to college regardless, which fair enough, fair enough. Education was always very highly prized in my family, and that is fair. I don't necessarily regret getting a college degree. I just wish I hadn't spent it on an art degree. You know what I mean? Like, whenever you are deciding whether or not you want to go to an art college, you are going and paying for connections,
Mm.
not for your art to magically get better. You are going for connections, and art school will then be what you make of it. If you want to work hard and do your best to make the most of it while in a very, very good, quite frankly, atmosphere for developing and honing your skills and connecting with your peers, then go for it, especially if it won't break your bank. Otherwise, if you go just because you think art school is going to be easy or because like you kind of like art, but whatever, I would not recommend it. It will rip apart your bank account, first of all, but also there is no magic spell to get good at art. You just have to practice, and that's it. Art school is what you make of it. My roommate, one of the roommates that I had at the time, who was my roommate through most of my college experience, I had horrible experiences with roommates, but she went to SCAD on a scholarship. We both had scholarships. I also had financial aid, but she ended up losing her scholarship because she was failing her classes basically. And so not to flex, but I graduated with like 3.9. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, but my point is, because I was doing well in classes, she would ask me for help, right? Like with her projects and stuff. And she would always show me unfinished stuff, and I'd be like, okay, so when's this due? And she's like, it's due tomorrow. And I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, girl, it's 1 a.m. And so I'm just like, you should have started this earlier, first of all. Second of all, like, and she's just like, I guess I'm just not going to turn it in, which is the worst thing you can do. Every single professor at SCAD will say it's better than nothing. But like, and like, she was a nice person. Don't get me wrong. We aren't friends anymore because of how embittered that entire experience left me. But she was a nice person, but she lost her scholarship, and then she refused to essentially work to regain it, to be able to regain it. So it put a huge financial like duress on her and her family. And while I was like trying to offer her, opportunities, and of course, as a result of her not focusing on the projects and the work she was given, it resulted in her not really improving that much since all the years that I known her.
Right.
SCAD is what you make of it. Art school in general will be what you make of it. You're not going to just get better. You have to still work. Unfortunately, there is no potion to make you magically amazing at work.
Well, one thing that you did talk on or mention there is that the idea that there is no magical formula to becoming an artist. It's practice, it's work, it's hard work. And it's interesting because like as you've spoken throughout kind of this episode or this conversation, you've talked a lot about like a lot of repetition ultimately. You've talked about like ask blogs, you've talked about like streaming that, about fan art, about your own art as you've gone through. And I like the idea that I think a lot of people, I'm even guilty of it, as I said at the beginning, like I can't draw. There's no thing in the world that could make me be able to draw. It's also, I've never practiced drawing. I decided I was bad at it and I don't do it. So I like what you're talking about though, of the idea of like it's a talent, but it's also a skill. So there is like a level of needing to sort of hone that work in the same way that you would have to hone anything else, like the same way you would have to hone being a surgeon. You still have to practice. You can't just draw tomorrow and be perfect. So when it came to kind of creating your own story, which you've mentioned a little bit here about like Steven Universe opening your eyes to the idea of what could be on a sort of a platform or in a story, in when it came to animation or into drawing itself, when you created Brimstone and Roses, where did you get the idea? I think you talked briefly about kind of the idea of like the fear that you were experiencing, but for people who, unlike me, haven't read the comic, if you want to give like a brief overview of what it's about and kind of where we start, and also maybe where you got that idea to get started and to make it.
Sure. So I can give a quick, I guess, overview of Brimstone and Roses' birth, as they say, or whatever. But okay, so listen, I did just shit talk SCAD. However, I actually did come up with Brimstone and Roses during a SCAD class. It was one of my comic script writing classes that I had to take. I will be fully honest. Never pictured myself as a comic artist. It's not that I don't enjoy comics. It's just that whenever I first entered the art sphere, professionally speaking, comics to me were just DC, Marvel, only superheroes, like only super, serious things. I do not like to read, honestly. So comics were just completely past me. Like, I like Garfield. That's my favorite comic. Don't ask me any more questions. But yeah, so sorry, during the script writing class though, we of course, we're learning how to write a professional script. And the first part of, and for this class, you basically would like the beginning of the class is like pitching the comic, or sorry, creating a comic. And then by the end of the class, you have a pitch packet that you can pitch to a publisher, basically.
Okay.
So we all came up with 3 hooks. One of them, I remember, was a hook for my passion project. The other one was some random fucking throwaway hook. And the final one, which became Brimstones and Roses, was girl summons demon to bring to a wedding. And that was the hook. That was it. And everyone loved that hook. And I just remember being like, well, I like this one better, but fine. Because I put my like passion project there. And this is also something that I always say in a lot of interviews where it's like, I've learned as, you know, as an adult, you should never start, your first project should never be your passion project. Because we all have that one project that we have hold so deep to our hearts. We've had it for so long. And at this point, you don't want to touch it because it is your passion project. You know, nothing you ever do will be perfect enough for it. You don't want people to come in and change it and criticize it. It's something that you've had since you were really young. It's got your favorite characters in it. It's got everything, you know, it's got your unresolved childhood trauma that you wrote into it subconsciously. Like, it's got everything, you know?
Yeah.
And that is the problem. It is a cake of everything. And that is not good whenever you are trying to write a comic, especially as your first one. So Brimstone and Roses was what I ended up pursuing with the class. And I thought to myself, well, you know, whatever. It's, you know, it's a short comic. I'm probably never going to do this anyway. I had the really big benefit, honestly, of working on this like comic premise with my class, a bunch of other people who love comics and are going into it and understand, you know, the nuances to it, as well as, you know, my professor, he was there too. He was also very helpful, I'm sure. But I had the really big benefit of being in a critique class where people were not afraid to, like, you know, say, this is weird. Why does this happen? Why doesn't she do this? In fact, one of the biggest like questions I got on the initial premise of, well, if she has a demon contract, why doesn't she just leave? And I was like quietly typing in a loophole. Must be able to take care of him, which means not moving away or something like that. Yeah. Like literally just having to like add in these things. And it's like, of course, the plot for Brimstone is not airtight. A plot should never be airtight. I like to think of a plot, especially an outline, to be a net where it is still flexible, but it is still secure.
Yeah.
You have, you know, a good premise to work off, but there is still room for pushing and pulling. Brimstone and Roses was a project that I eventually made the pitch packet for. I had the first, what became essentially the launch episodes, the first 4 episodes of Brimstone and Roses. That was what I essentially wrote in my script class.
Okay.
And then I had the synopsis that we had to write for the entire comic, and that became my pitch packet. So it was all 3 character sheets. Alex was in my initial character sheet. He didn't have a beard, which means he looked fucking weird, but that's okay. He looked like Lucky Luciano. Like, he looked weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, sorry. B, Lazarus, Alex, and then from there we had like environment, and then the synopsis, the script, and then finally a cover. And that was the end of the project. Like, it was fine. And then a friend approached me. I think it was actually who is now my sister-in-law, but another friend. They had both like messaged me and be like, hey, have you ever heard of something called Webtoon? And I was like, what the fuck's a Webtoon? They were just like, oh, it's like web comics. I just bring it up because there's this contest going on. And this was like in 2018. And I was like, I don't really know if I got time. And they're like, the prize money is $80,000. I'm like, tell me more. So I was like, I personally really, really like not being in debt.
Yeah.
That is my life aspiration, to be financially secure.
Yeah.
I don't think that's that far from many people's aspirations. But basically, I was like, well, shit, I don't know what to make. You know what? I already have this like pitch done. I'll just make Brimstone and Roses. And this will be essentially my like test drive before I do my passion comic, you know, because I wasn't very secure in my art. I don't have experience drawing backgrounds really at the time. Like, I was very much no background, shoulders up kind of girl, you know what I mean? Looking in a 3/4 angle. Let's not press the questions there. But yeah, so I was like, this is a good opportunity. You know, I've already had it picked apart by professionals. And then furthermore, I don't mind, you know, adjusting it as needed for Webtoon format because I'm not that attached to it. So I start working on Brimstone and Roses. I started uploading for the contest. Contest comes to an end. I think I had around 24,000 subs. I did not place or anything. I didn't even get honorable mention. I was really, really heartbroken. I was like with one of my best friend from college, Matt. I was like at his place on the night of the announcement, and I was really upset. I wasn't crying or anything, but like I was about to. And he was like, you know, best friend from college. So we like chilled, you know, we hung out, I think we watched Steven Universe, actually. We were watching like some sort of animated thing and stuff. And he was like comforting me which is really nice of him because, you know, as I mentioned many times, I'm from a small town. Part of why my artistic journey, I think, was so stagnant for so long is because whenever you are a small fish in a small pond, or like a big fish in a small pond, you get a certain level of arrogance.
Mm.
And whenever I moved to art school, there weren't that many, like I was still like, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I was a good artist. I could do my work in time and I produced good work. And my professors liked that about me. And a lot of my like colleagues and stuff, they were of course good artists too, but there was definitely a bit of a varying skill level, especially in the early days whenever for some reason SCAD makes every major take drawing classes,
Oh.
including majors where you don't really need them. So like you had people who were like going into architecture having to draw figure drawings, and that is
Oh,
unfortunate for
Lord.
them. I'm so sorry. It's not as bad as like the poor art history majors who are just like, why the hell
Why
am
am
I
I
here?
here?
You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say though is that I was very arrogant. And as a result, I didn't want to admit that I didn't know how to do things.
Mm.
And so that being said, whenever it came to Brimstone and Roses, it really took me down a peg. It's like I wasn't expecting first, but I was expecting, I don't know, something, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So that really knocked me down a peg. I continued to work, you know, and I was kind of just like, whatever. It's like, this is just fun. I'm still gonna post though, because Webtoon has an ad sharing thing where it's like, you get a certain amount of views, you get $100. I'm like, I like $100. That is money for food.
Yeah.
And so I continue to post, and then on my 10th episode, which involves B waking up and realizing Laz is still there, and her just being like, "Why? Excuse me, get out of my house." But that was the end of my essentially that was the end of season 1 for at the time it's called Discover. It's now called Canvas, but Canvas, Brimstone and Roses.
Yeah.
And so that is whenever my editor at the time, Annie, contacted me and said, "Hey, I really like your stuff. Do you want to work for Webtoon?" And I was just like, I don't want to do a job search whenever I graduate. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So I was still in college. My senior project, my senior year, I was working on Brimstone and Roses for like publication. I was getting paid to go to class basically. And that was all I did. And it was very weird being employed in a group full of like, you know, seniors and stuff. I know that some of my friends said some not the nicest things whenever they had found out, just because I know that we're all stressed and uncomfortable, you know. And so like the irony of me writing this story where it's like I don't know what's going to happen after college, now it's like I do know I'm going to be writing about what not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And so it's like I had friends who of course were happy for me, but then I also had friends who said like some pretty hurtful stuff. Like I remember the first friend that I told was just like completely silent, and she goes like, "Congratulations." And the next day she came to class and she was just like, or I think she's like, "Yeah, you're really lucky that people like your demon character." And I just remember turning to her and just being like, I drew over 101 panels for a contest while also doing summer classes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't luck so much as I was working. And that was the end of that conversation. And then, like,
I think the interesting thing that you're talking about is I like what you said about being a big fish in a small pond and how that sort of allows you to have a level of arrogance that perhaps keeps you from progressing. So you sort of, instead of waiting to get thrown into a bigger pond, went and found one. And then that ultimately pushed you to greater success, which is pretty cool.
yeah, and you know, entering Webtoon, everyone is so fucking talented, and I mean this like with such admiration. There are so many very kind people, amazing artists, amazing storytellers, and that really helped open my eyes, you know, into like, you know, it's never that I thought I was like on the best artist in the world. I mean, did whenever I was 4, but that's because I was 4, and the world consisted of my household.
Sure,
but like,
sure.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even then, like my mom's an artist, so like, girl, what are you talking about? So basically, it was never to the point where it's like I'm better than anyone, you know. It's more just like people being, you know, I was known in like high school and stuff like, oh yeah, May's a really good artist. That art project that people, it's immediately just people staring at me. No.
Yeah.
You know, that being said, you don't want to admit weakness in those points where it's like, you know, in a way, I don't know. Like I remember my high school art teacher like came to me one day and was like, "May, do you like know how to do perspective rules?" Because I think I was trying to sleep. I was always exhausted in high school. My high school art teacher was just like, "Do you like May? Why aren't you doing the perspective lines? Like, do you know how to do a perspective grid?" And I just said yes. Girl, I didn't know what a perspective grid was. What the fuck? Well, I just said yes like an asshole, and he believed me like an asshole.
Right.
So then I get to college, and it's like by that point, I had, of course, the internet is amazing. I learned, you know, I looked up videos and stuff. It was humbling, but I am thankfully a very quick learner. So, you know, again, I kept a pace. I was never, not to brag, but flipping my hair right now, my art did get hung on the wall, and my and my art is still used as an example for some storyboarding classes. Not to brag, but I am bragging. But yeah, I was a skilled artist, but I could have been more skilled if I hadn't had that level of like arrogance and embarrassment and being scared to admit that I didn't know something. And now as an adult, I still catch myself doing that sometimes. Like I'm like, I don't need this. I already know what color theory is. And then I'm like, I think that red and purple look good together. I don't know. Like it's not good. It's not great.
I think getting over that arrogance, allowing you to like sort of is what allows you to flourish. And it's good to know sort of where your Achilles heel, so to speak, comes from and learning how to overcome it. The thing I was curious about is just to tie it back to one of the things that you mentioned is that to me, I think Brimstone and Roses has such great we've talked a lot about diversity, we've talked about body diversity, and we talked about how Steven Universe was one of the shows that had body diversity early on. And I think you mentioned that Rose Quartz was one of the first plus size characters that you drew, and obviously B, the lead of Brimstone and Roses, is also plus size. So I was curious if you wanted to talk about. I know you wanted to sort of talk about that adventure, that first experience of drawing that character.
Okay. So first of all, first thing to know, B was originally a D&D character. She was a tiefling, ironically. And then I made her human for the comic, and then I used this random like demon character I had drawn because one of my professors at SCAD was just like, oh, I know you all got that pretty boy demon character. Like, I know you all have one. Everyone here has one. Don't even try to pretend to me. I'm sure he's got hair like this. And he was like, he was roasting the hell out of everyone because everyone in my class was just sitting there like,
hand on face, thinking to myself, and I was
like, yeah. Well, I was just like, I don't have a demon character. And so I went home and I made one. He also hated green, and that's why Laz has green hair. Because I was like, I'm gonna do this just to troll him. And it's not like this professor wasn't like a jerk or anything. Like he was very friendly.
Sure.
So I made Laz and I used him as my demon character because, and I hate to say this because it's going to make me seem very analytical, but I know that by having a plus side lead, quite frankly, it might have issues gaining an audience because people are unfortunately bigoted. And if it doesn't cover this fat character losing weight, then some people just won't want to read it. So I'm just like, I guess I will add in this little white, crusty Tumblr sexy man. Y'all take him. Yes. Okay. So as I was saying, Rose Quartz was the first character I had drawn that was plus size at the time. Even way back then, a lot of people, people online, they praised me for being able to draw different body types. And by different body types, it was like, I drew slender characters and muscular characters, essentially, like muscular women. So I was proud of that. I was, a teen, and I was glad that I was able to show diversity, because it was so limited where I came from. And it was also something that I just wanted to see. I wanted to see more, interesting looking characters. Cause it was also racial diversity, not like, I didn't have a bunch of like, I don't think I guess Laz. But I was like, I don't really have any characters that are like white and blonde and blue-eyed.
Sure.
Which were very common, at least way back when. But I also had gone through a giant Dragon Age phase. And in particular, my Hawk character was a buff woman. And so it was, and then my like Warden character was like a very slender woman because I wanted that big diverse, because like my Warden was a mage and then my Hawk was a warrior. So I wanted that to be portrayed in their character designs. And I had also, like everyone, I really wanted to go into character design growing up. And then I was like, the gaming industry is really mean to women. And also it's extremely competitive. And I was like, never mind, I will go with storyboarding instead. But yeah, so I was really proud though. I was really happy that people thought that my designs looked unique, that they could, easily tell my characters apart. That meant a lot to me. And then that being said, and this is where it gets to Rose Quartz. I drew Rose Quartz, and I never did any full bodies of her, but because I didn't know how to draw plus size characters, I did I think a face down painting, and I had given her really sharp cheekbones, and someone was just like, why does she look skinny? And I just remember at the time being really angry and annoyed and embarrassed about it. And then I don't remember this is before or after, but someone was like being like, oh, I like, how you draw different bodies or whatever. And someone messaged me on Anonymous, because on Tumblr you can go on Anonymous. And I have been lucky to escape the brunt of most anon hate, infamous as it is. But someone went on, is just like, you keep saying that you can draw diverse body types, but you don't have any fat characters, all you draw is stick thin characters. And I just remember at the time, I was again, very angry, very upset, deleted the ask immediately and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just didn't address it because that ask was given in bad faith. But I did later after I had calmed down, I was like, but they are right.
Mm,
Why am I saying that I know how to draw diverse body types, but I don't know how to draw like fat characters or like even chubby characters? Like, is that, fair of me to claim? And so that is whenever I drew B, her first design. She was a tiefling. She was a bit chubby. If anyone's read the Q&A on Brimstone and Roses, I believe I did post it,
mhm.
but she was very different, partially because she was a demon, partially because, again, I was still trying to, like, feel out how to draw thicker characters.
Sure.
Um, and so from there, B developed, and I started getting more comfortable with drawing rounder forms, and what really made me start drawing fat characters, actually, is Good Omens.
Mm,
Yes, it was that recent. It was Good Omens that where I started to really draw plus-size characters because of Aziraphale, who I personally really like portrayals of where he's very soft and round compared to, like,
sure.
Crowley being very lanky and
Yeah.
like a stick bug. That was really mean. I'm sorry. He's not a stick bug. He's tall. I'm sorry. That was
Just a
really
lanky
mean.
dude.
That shape form, I really liked. And of course, obviously I started doing more research into it. And then at the time that Good Omens came around, I was already working on Brimstone and Roses, and Bee's shape was a lot fuller. So I was, drawing her constantly obviously is going to help me improve, as one would expect. But yeah, so basically, ever since I had Brimstone and Roses, though, people have asked me like, well, why'd you make B fat? Like, why'd you do this? And I was just like, and it's not even in mean ways, just, other people are like, thank you so much for making her fat.
Sure.
Like, I am fat and I really, appreciate seeing diversity, but I wanted to know, like, what made you make that character design decision? And I really don't have anything other to say than she was a reused character and she just happened to be fat. It wasn't an agenda. It was just I'm not good at making up character designs on the spot, and she was there, and I always thought her concept was really funny because as a D&D character, she was a tiefling who was a barbarian with a baking pin, or a rolling pin as a weapon, and her goal in life was to so she had a bakery, and then there was a bakery that opened up across the street from hers that did better, and so she wanted to destroy that bakery by buying it out. She wanted to be a capitalist,
Yeah.
and that was her story. And then I never got to play her, and so I ended up taking her design though because I thought she was really a fun character in concept. And I already had her, and
Yeah.
I just moved her into this project, and it worked out great because it also, again, another part is that the shape language is really nice compared to her and Laz. Laz is a lanky son of a bitch, and she is very soft and cute and like round. So in my heart, at least, it was an appealing, also like visual distinction as well, and
Yeah.
it also suited her personality. And Laz's, it's just they just work together well. In conclusion, so
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying about kind of like the backstory of the first character being almost. I think the person who sent you that ask obviously was doing it in a bad faith way, as you mentioned. But as you said, kind of giving you the chance to sort of think back and say, okay, yeah, actually, I don't know how to do this, and learning how to do that, and then for that to ultimately become something that you're really quite good at doing, and it's a very. I think one of the things that's great about that character is that because the character design is, not the typical sort of, like, romance comic character, it does stand out in the way that it gives it a really distinct style and a really distinct look off the top of just the cover. Or if you happen to see just the character design, it's something that you go, "Oh, I'm interested in that character, and I'd like to see what she has to say or what her adventure is." Um, and I think it's interesting that you basically are saying that it wasn't like a choice. I think you mentioned earlier that you wrote out the story before you drew the character designs. So B's story would have been B's story whether she were of a different body type or of this body type, and giving her sort of the center of a romance, and getting to see her as a character who's not doesn't have a storyline of she's losing weight or she's ashamed of her body or these different things. You actually get to see her as a powerful romantic lead, and I think that's great. But it's interesting that you sort of are saying that you learned how to do that off of someone sending you some anon hate off of a character from Steven Universe.
yeah, and it's like I always kind of hesitate when I tell this story just because I I'm so scared of people taking it in the wrong way, you know
Mm,
what I mean?
sure.
If that makes sense, because I don't want people to think that I made B as my token fat character or anything. Like, that
No.
is my I don't know, I've had people who have been mad at me that I made B fat because I myself am not fat. Um, again, media that with diversity in it will always be held to a much, like, tighter or, like, much bigger microscopic lens than media that isn't. But, at the end of the day, this story would have existed with characters, and maybe they might not necessarily have been B and Laz, but I'm glad that they are
Yeah.
because I love my characters. I love B and Laz a lot. You might not be able to see it, but, like, for podcast viewers, we are also on a video call, but my background is literally just like my desk space. It is all Brimstone and Roses fan art.
Yeah.
Like fan art commissions, like my own merchandise of Brimstone and Roses. Like I genuinely do love my characters at this point. I am much more attached to the project than I ever counted on being
Yeah.
because again, this was just supposed to be a like, training wheels project. And while there are things, I regret, this is my first story at the end of the day, my first published story. And so I think I did a good job. I don't know, like it's my building on fire in the background. I think I did a good
Yeah,
job.
everything is fine. This is fine. No, I honestly, I do think sometimes I think that the criticism about like a token fat character can be can be genuine when it is being done incorrectly, right? But I think also a lot of times that that feeling can come from the fact that there is an otherness about that automatically, and so people jump to say that it's being done for tokenism when it's really just a character who is given a story and does not look the norm. And so I think, at least for me, my personal opinion is I've never felt that way out of that character. So I don't know. I think there's a sort of chronic echo chamber of this is other and therefore I'm criticizing it and there's no right way to do it, as we talked a little bit about earlier. Um, and it's a sometimes I think a little unfair, but well, I can't speak for every person in the world, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think one thing I am curious about, and then I'll probably ask you our final question and wrap things up, but the because I can see your fan art and I know how popular the webcomic has become, or the Webtoon comic now has become, what is it like to have gone from being someone who participated in fandom and drew fan art and had Tumblr ask blogs and were a fan really primarily to now have a fandom of your own of people who are drawing your characters and engaging in your art in that same way?
It's very surreal. I can't even put it into words. Like anytime I see fan art of my series, it's like I'm very happy, of course, but also I just like I get such a like I almost like disassociate just because it's not even in a bad way. It's just like I don't know. It's hard to feel that people care about things that I make, which sounds really sad. I have no excuse. It is sad. I don't know. Like, I hate to say it, like, and hate to air out my family trauma, but like, my family isn't the most supportive. Like, not that they don't, like, my siblings are fine, but like,
Sure.
none of them really partake in my series or anything. So, any validation I get from my series is from my friends and from the readers themselves, of course. And of course, it doesn't help that like I have struggled openly in the past with Webtoon, especially with marketing my series. And so whenever I started seeing fan art come out and like my friends, um, even friends from college that were like it's not that we weren't friends, it's just that I didn't know them very well, but like people which was in a way better, like people that I
Mm,
didn't really know that well, like drawing fan art for me and like talking about my series, like it was really surreal. We had to do like at SCAD, we had to do like this like fake like this mini artist Sally, and my biggest print was a Brimstone and Roses print. I only had like 2 of them made because it was just like not coming out yet, and it was like $30, so it was also pretty pricey. And one of my friends, one of the friends who actually like helped me or not helped me, but like I talked to about SCAD because they were a follower on Tumblr
yeah.
prior, or they came up and they bought my print and they asked me to sign it. And that was like I'm like tearing up thinking about it because that meant so much to me, even though like I didn't know that friend super well,
Yeah.
but it just meant so much that they would bother to do that. They were the only one who bought the print too. So it was just very touching. And so now like in present day, Brimstone and Roses has like around 500,000 subs. Not all of them are active, but it's still surreal to like go and like see all the comments, see people talk about it. My series is of course not as big as like, other series and stuff. And it's just surreal. And like I have plushies made of my characters. Like people have bought Laz plushies. There's a B plushie still up for pre-order that I'm still working on, getting sold. Like people have bought body pillows of them. It's very surreal to know
Yeah.
that people like these characters, that people care about these characters, that like I've seen people cosplay them. Hell, there's been like a human ginger cosplayer that entered into one of my contests. It was great. Is like amazingly done. Like it's weird in the best of ways.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I meet someone in person, they're like, because like there'll be times whenever my sister, who is a much more social person than me, she's like, "Oh, I made this friend the other day. I told them about you. I told them about your comic. They said that they've read your comic," and I'm like, "What? Don't." And it's like I am like flattered, but also so embarrassed
Yeah.
about being perceived. That's great. It's just weird, and in a good way. It's a really weird feeling. It really is. I don't know how else to explain it. Sorry.
No, I think that was a great answer. I think surreal sounds like the right word as you go through it. I think it's nice. It's cool when you're able to kind of have those instances where you talk about like someone coming and buying your poster or making a fan art or at least giving you, it sounds like, a moment of being able to push away from sort of the reality of work and what has to be done and be able to see kind of that you are outside of the negativity having a positive impact on people. So I think that's great. I think that's a really positive thing. And I know I personally have really enjoyed reading it, and it's a nice escape when you sit down and there's a new episode. It's always exciting. You get a little
That's so funny
notification.
because I remember someone, like, made a comment to me, and it's like, all understandable, but I remember reading one comment because I read all the comments because clearly I do not know what's good for myself. But, no, someone was just like, "This is a really good story, but I kinda have to stop reading it because it's really mentally draining and triggering
Oh
for me,
no.
so I'll come back later whenever it's, like, not about this," and I'm like, "Honey, this is
This
it.
is
This
it.
is
This is
it.
what
I'm
it's about. Yeah.
sorry." Like, I'm sorry, like, they'll get better eventually,
Yeah.
but, like, this is not a feel goodsy comic. I'm sorry.
Right.
This is about trauma.
Yeah. Nope, fair. But I think, personally, I think it's a really good piece of work, and I think it's also, to tie it back to Steven Universe, like, has similar feelings where you do have sort of, the ability to discuss trauma, the ability to discuss darker themes, but to be able to always fall back on, well, this is like a demon and his, kinda not girlfriend, we maybe are interested in each other vibes. Like, it allows
Yeah.
you to have that sort of, release valve, I guess, in the same way that you have mentioned with Steven Universe earlier on.
Yeah, and I really like adding, like, comedy to my works. Like, I have a second project called My Werewolf Girlfriend, and that one is slice of life and a lot more chill. It's more chill. It is more chill because it is a slice of life, even though whenever I pitched it to Webtoon, my editor came back and was like, "Okay, so they don't really want it as it is. They think that you should have an overarching plot." And I'm like, "So you want it to be depressing? I see."
I
Like,
see.
because 'cause I'm like, "What
We
else am I
follow,
supposed to say to that?"
yeah.
Like,
I'm following. I'm picking up what you're putting down. You'd like some sad. That's okay. Some angst.
I love sad, but, part of the problem is, again, marketing, and it's like, again, because I hate myself, I, of course, look at reviews, and, like, I can't believe I'm going to say Goodreads of all places, but someone was really upset with the series because they were like, "This isn't the cardboard romance that I was like a lighthearted, feel-goodsy romance that I was expecting. This girl has issues." And then it was like into it, and she like gave it like 2 stars. She was like, "I feel bad about my rating, but," and then it was like that's
Just, like,
done. She's
goes
like,
into it,
"This is
yeah.
really fucked up. It's really hard to read because it's so exhausting and upsetting, and like it's sure she might be getting better, but it's just such." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I never told you that it was a good like feel-goodsy thing." And I established from the beginning that it's gonna be kind of emotional,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, anyway, so it's just like, I think also one thing about fandoms, speaking of, and it's very ironic now that I'm making this connection, but like the negativity of a fandom is really, really like hurts me as a person. And I don't know why. I know better to stay away from it from other fandoms, but whenever it's my stuff, it's probably because it's just more personal.
Mm,
But I look at it and I'm like, what the hell? But like these days, thankfully, because like I signed on to Webtoon whenever I was 21. I'm 25 now.
yeah.
It's been a long time. But oh my god, it's been a long time. But yeah, sorry. But I was really young. I was very, very unsure of what was going on. It's been pretty stressful, just the things going on in my life. And so having on that like heaping amount of like vitriol for some reasons more valid than others, most of them not though,
Yeah.
a lot of them not, was just really trying on me as a person, which I hate to say, so I can only imagine, how it's like for I guess like Rebecca Sugar, who like nearly had to quit her damn job just to get like a wedding scene and then have people, being like, this is homophobic, and I'm like, they are literally two girls kissing.
It's a stretch.
Hmm.
Oh man. Well, I think it would be great. Yeah, like you sort of did the tie back, which is always lovely. Which is when we kind of what we started with was talking about Steven Universe and how that impacted you as a creator and how it helped you sort of see the possibilities, even if those possibilities weren't necessarily perfect at all times. So I think I'll kind of ask you the last question I ask everybody, which is if you had never seen Steven Universe, what would be different about you today?
That's honest. It's a really good question. I don't want to say I don't know because it's like, I mean, well, yeah, no shit, you don't know, it didn't happen. But like, I feel Steven Universe's impact on the animation genre, I think, had waves. So I'm sure I would have seen other like child's media, quote unquote, that covered, darker themes and like addressed them. Some of them honestly have done it better than Steven Universe, but in a way they were able to because, Steven Universe cracked open that gate.
Sure.
Not that, other series haven't in the past, but Steven Universe was so big at the time. I think if I had never seen it, I honestly don't know. It really did inspire me to go into storyboarding. So who knows? Maybe I would have been a doctor, and I don't know. If honestly, damn, maybe I should have seen. No, I'm kidding. But I was like, no, but I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't think I would. I might not have pursued an art career path just because Steven Universe is also when I started looking into storyboarding because so many people were bitching about the storyboards that I was like, what the hell is a storyboard? And I went and looked it up. So I don't know. Maybe I would have been a comic artist, and maybe I would have gone into like concept art instead and been struggling somewhere else,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think. Like Steven Universe, it's like the butterfly effect,
Mm,
I watched it, and because of its effect on everything else and the way that it shaped animation and also just like fandom culture in a way, just affected me in that way, where it's like I know better than to go and look for fandom drama now.
sure.
Good for me. I continue to adore musicals. Also good for me because again, Rebecca Sugar, great songwriter. Oh my god. There is some alternate universe where I never saw Steven Universe. Maybe I never looked into storyboarding and feeling like I could make something of this degree.
Yeah.
And maybe I went to go and do a STEM major, women in STEM.
Yeah, there's one more surgeon, but one less really great artist. So I think that alternate universe is a bummer. Not that we don't need surgeons. People out there, please become surgeons. But I think it would
Yes.
be a bummer to have lost you to the scalpel, so to speak. Um,
That does sound like I just died
I
during
know.
the malpractice. That's fair. No, you're so funny.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
it's all good. But yeah, in hindsight, this entire discussion, this entire podcast interview, yeah, I'm really glad that I gave Steven Universe a chance.
Yeah.
Whenever I was growing up.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad too, and I'm glad you were able to have the impact of the show and like you said, the ripples that Steven Universe was able to make on the animation space going forward and what's come since I think has it's a really powerful piece of media that made a big difference to a lot of people. So I'm glad that it made a big difference to you, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your sort of journey and experience with Steven Universe and how it got you to where you are today. And I appreciate you taking the time to hang out.
No, thank you so much for having me. I was really flattered that you asked. I don't know. I feel like, my series has been going for so long. Sometimes I forget that there are still new readers even so. I mean, not that you're a new reader, but you know what I mean. I don't know.
No, of
You
course.
know what
Well, and if you're listening and you haven't checked out Brimstone and Roses, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's on Webtoon. I think the comic is a great one. So if you are listening and you've enjoyed hanging out with me and May today, I would highly recommend checking out May's work. So yeah, so if you're listening, and you haven't checked it out, make sure to go check out Brimstone and Roses. And thank you all for hanging out with me and May today. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I hope y'all enjoy.
Between now and next Wednesday, if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me on social media at Marissa Kamari, anywhere you get your social media fix. You can also sign up for my newsletter by going to our website, tandonproductions.com, clicking on You Are What You Love, and signing up there. I send out an issue with every episode of this podcast. And we just started a Discord server, so if you want to connect with me, with other listeners, and talk about the types of things that we are talking about on this show, you can join that by clicking on the link in the episode description. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.